Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Shabbos Daf Zayin contains two primary discussions. One is about what situations you are allowed to be machmer like both sides of a dispute. And the other is again back to Hilchos Eruvin, discussing a mavoi which opens on both ends, possibly to Rishus Harabim, possibly to a field, possibly to a broken yard, and possibly to a broken chutzner. And the Gemara will compare and contrast those four scenarios. We begin several lines into the daf where the Gemara is trying to figure out how is it possible that the Chamim of Naharda paskin stringently l'chumra in two conflicting machloksin between Rav and Shmuel about a bent mavoi, a cornered mavoi. We have two machloks in there, and the Gemara says that in Naharda they went l'chumra in both opinions. In one they went like Rav l'chumra, and one they went like Shmuel l'chumra. Gemara says you can't do that. We had seen about Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, you're not allowed to go l'chumra both ways. Somebody who goes l'chumra both ways is a fool who walks in the darkness. So how could the Chamim of Naharda do that with this machlokis Rav and Shmuel? So the Gemara offers two approaches. The first one is brought by Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who says that they were holding like Rav Huna's version of Rav. Rav Huna's version of Rav is that when he ruled leniently, he said not to follow that halacha. He said, even though this is the halacha, you should go l'chumra anyway. And therefore they were completely following Rav. They followed his chumra, his stringent ruling. And in his other issue where he ruled leniently, he anyway said to follow the stringent opinion. And the Gemara says, okay, but what about Rav Ada bar Ava's understanding of Rav, where he said that, no, you could follow my lenient opinion, so how come they didn't follow his lenient opinion if they were following his other stringent opinion? So Gemara says as follows, the only time you can't follow two chumras is where those two chumras conflict. They can't both be true. Meaning you have one argument about an issue, and that issue is relevant to two halachas. In one case, each side of the argument is a kula and a chumrah. One side is a kula, one side is a chumrah. And in the other case that comes from the same issue, it's reversed. So you can't go to chumrah in both because only one of them is correct about the core argument. You can't both be a chumrah. You can't have it both ways. Here, however, it's two separate arguments, two separate discussions. I can go like Rav l'chumra, and I can go like Shmuel l'chumra because I could say that one is right about one l'chumra and one is right about the other argument. They don't conflict. It's not contradictory. They could both be true. What's an example of a contradictory machlokes where you have one machlokes that's relevant to two cases that you couldn't rule contradictorily? So the Gemara says a good example of that is machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about the skeleton of a human being. Now the halacha is as follows: various parts of the dead are matame in an ohel. That means that if you or something is in a room together with this part of a dead person, it transfers tuma to you or the thing just by virtue of being in the same room. Now, as far as bones, most bones don't do that. There are some parts of bones who do that, like if you have a whole skeleton or something, or if you have a majority of a skeleton. But if you have an entire spinal column, that does transfer tuma. And if you have an entire skull, that also transfers tuma both through ohel, through being in the room. Now, the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is how much needs to be missing from that skull or spinal column in order for the transfer of tuma to be canceled in an ohel. So, Beis Hillel has the smaller shear. Beis Hillel says in the spinal column has to be missing one vertebrae, and Beis Shammai says two vertebrae. Beis Hillel says in the skull it has to be missing enough to be removed from a living person that will cause him to die, which is a sela, the size of a coin. According to Beis Shammai, it's a drill's hole, which is a slightly larger amount. Now, according to Beis Hillel, if you have a smaller amount missing, the thing no longer has power to transfer tuma through an ohel. That is a kula. However, there's another discussion where Beis Hillel's opinion comes out l'chumra, and that's if you have an animal that has the same amount missing, is it treif or not? According to Beis Hillel, a smaller amount makes it treif. That's a chumra. According to Beis Shammai, you need a large amount to make it treif. That's a kula. The animal won't be treif, and therefore not kosher until a larger piece of its spine or skull is missing. These are contradictory because it's the same discussion. Is it the larger shear or the smaller shear for what makes the person or the animal not able to live with this? What is the significant part of bone structure that he needs to survive? You can't have it both ways. If you rule like either opinion, if you rule l'chumra both ways, then you're being foolish. So now the Gemara says, okay, I'll accept that, but I have a problem because I have a situation where Rabbi Akiva actually did this. He ruled the Chumrah both ways. What was the case? He was collecting esrogim from his esrog tree on the first day of the month of Shvat. Now, it was the third year of Shemitah. Now, the rule is that the third year in the Shemitah cycle, the years begin in Shvat. It's Machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel if it's on the first day of Shvat or if it's on the 15th day of Shvat. According to Beis Shammai, the year starts on the first day of Shvat. According to Beis Hillel, it's the 15th of Shvat. Now, the third year, you need to bring Ma'aser Ani. And the second year, you have to bring Ma'aser Sheni. So when Rabbi Akiva was collecting on the first day, he's finding himself in a spot, whereas the Machlokes is Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, which Ma'aser he has to bring. According to Beis Hillel, the third year didn't start yet. It didn't start until the 15th of Shvat, and therefore it's still the second year, and he has to bring Ma'aser Sheni. And according to Beis Shammai, it's already the first day of Shvat, and therefore the third year already began. Now you have to bring Ma'aser Ani, and not Ma'aser Sheni. What did Rabbi Akiva do? He brought both. So you see, he went l'chumra both ways in a contradictory machlokes. The Gemara says, no. He wasn't trying to be machmer both ways. He didn't remember which opinion was Beis Hillel's. And therefore, he had to do both ways because he was trying to rule like Beis Hillel, but he didn't know what Beis Hillel's opinion actually was. The Gemara now returns to a previous machlokes, Tanaim, which we had on Daf Vav, discussing a mavoi, an aliyah street, which goes from one Rosh Hashanah straight through to another Rosh Hashanah. The mavoi is open at both ends. And we had seen a machlokes here between the Tanna Kama, who says that in order to be able to carry within this mava, you need a tzuras Pesach, a door frame at one end, and a beam or a side post, a lechi or a koira, on the other end. That's the opinion of the Tanna Kama. According to Chananya, it's a machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, what exactly you need, but you definitely need doors, either on both ends or on one end. Now, the Gemara says that Rav Yosef was sitting in front of Rav Huna, and he said, in the name of Rav Yehuda, in the name of Rav. The names are important here. He said that entire machlokes between Chananya and the Tanna Kama about what you need is only talking about a mavoi that ends in Rosh Hashanah on both ends. It could be Rosh Hashanah, which is a major street called a Saratia, or it could be a marketplace, which is a Paltia, but it's got to be Rosh Hashanah on both ends. If you have fields on one end, which is a Carmelis and not a Rosh Hashanah, then everybody agrees you definitely don't need doors. It's enough to have a tzuras Pesach on one end and a lechi or kaira on the other end. Now, if you have fields on both ends, it's the same halacha. Now, the Gemara says, hold on a second. Obviously, if I have a field on one end, Rosh Hashanah on the other end, I don't need doors. Certainly, if I have fields on both ends, I don't need doors. The Gemara says, yeah, what it means to say is that if you have fields on one end, it's as if you have fields on both ends, and you don't need doors. Okay, good, that's that. Now, Rav Yosef continued saying in the name of Rav, and this, in the name of Rav Yehuda, Rav Yosef continued saying in the name of Rav Yehuda, and this time he did not say who Rav Yehuda heard it from. Rav Yehuda was the Talmud of both Rav and Shmuel, so we don't know if Rav Yehuda is saying this in the name of Rav or in the name of Shmuel. What was this additional halacha that he said? The following case. You have a mavoi. The back of the mavoi is open to a rechava. Rechava is somebody's personal backyard, not a public multiple use courtyard, which is in front of the house. This is a backyard. But the mavoi is open into somebody's backyard, and directly across from the mavoi, the wall of the backyard, the opposite wall fell down. There's an opening there, and that opening leads directly into Rosh Hashanah. So the mavoi, if you walk straight down the mavoi in a straight line, you'll pass into this person's backyard. You keep going straight, you'll go through the hole in the wall all the way into Rosh Hashanah. Does this count as a mavoi which is open to Rosh Hashanah? Now, the entrance to the mavoi all the way on the other end is in Rosh Hashanah, so you definitely have Rosh Hashanah on one end. The question is, do you have Rosh Hashanah on the other end? And on that, Rav Yehuda said, reports of Yosef, you don't. It's not Rosh Hashanah, and it's not a Carmelis either. You don't need anything. There's no problem. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to worry about that end at all. You just have to put a lechi or a kaira, a side beam or a cross beam, at the one end, the main entrance to the mavoi, which is near its own Rosh Hashanah. You don't have to worry about the part that goes through the backyard and into Rosh Hashanah afterwards at all. The reason is that this is not considered to be open to Rosh Hashanah. It's open into the courtyard. You can't carry through there into Rosh Hashanah, but you don't have to worry about Rosh Hashanah. There's no problem. Okay, now, as you recall, Rav Yosef said this name of Rav Yehuda, but didn't say which of his Rabbeim. So Abaye said, I'll prove to you that it must be that Rav Yehuda was saying the name of Shmuel, because Rav said two contradictory statements. The Gemara says one on this daf and one on the next daf. One contradictory statement of Rav which contradicts this halacha is the following halacha which Rav said, which is brought by Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. In the following case, a very similar case, you have a mavli which is open into a chutzner. This time it's not a backyard, it's a front yard. It's a chutzner which is shared by multiple houses. It's a chutzner. And if you walk directly across, again the wall fell down and it leads into Rishus Harabim. What halacha did Rav say in a case like that? Rav said you're allowed to carry in the chutzner, in the front yard. You're not allowed to carry in the mavli. Now, why should you not be allowed to carry in the mavli? According to the halacha that Rav Yehuda just said, you don't need anything. You just have to put a beam, a cross beam or a side post at the main entrance to the mavli, and then you can carry there. And here, in a very similar case, Rav is saying that you're not allowed to carry in the mavli altogether. There's no solution for it. Obviously, this statement of Rav Yehuda was not in the name of Rav, because this is contradictory. It must be the name of Shmuel. So Gemara says that Rav Yosef said, listen, I don't know who said it. Rav Yehuda, I don't know who Rav Yehuda got this halacha from. I just know that there was a case. There was such a case happened in a town of shepherds, and they came and asked Rav Yehuda what to do in this case of the mavli that leads into the backyard, which is broken to Rishus Harabim. And Rav Yehuda said, you don't have to do anything. Your initial, the side post or cross beam, which you always had, the entrance to the mavli is enough. You don't have to do anything extra. So now the Gemara says, okay. So Rav Yosef is accepting the fact that Abaye said that this statement must be in the name of Shmuel because Rav's halacha contradicts this. So now the Gemara says, no, there's a different way of interpreting Rav's halacha, which doesn't contradict it, and therefore it could be that Rav Yehuda was really quoting Rav. How so? That Rav's halacha is different than this halacha. Rav's halacha, the mavli is leading into a chutzner. A chutzner has multiple people using it. That means you have to have an Eruv Chatzeros. Eruv Chatzeros, as we call, and you can check our introduction, which is still online. An Eruv Chatzeros is when multiple people have usage of one chutzner. You cannot carry within it, or into it, or out of it, unless you do an Eruv Chatzeros. That means that you form all the people who use the chutzner into one conglomerate, and then the chutzner doesn't belong to multiple individuals, it belongs to one conglomerate. Now, what happened here is that the chutzner has an Eruv, an Eruv Chatzeros. The mavoi does not have an Eruv, and that's called Shitufim Mavais, and that does not have an Eruv with the chutzner itself. Now, in a situation like that, you're allowed to carry within the chutzner, and you're not allowed to carry within the Eruv. What's the reason? As follows: there's a halacha that if a mavoi is fully open to an area that you can't carry in, the mavoi cannot have carrying going on within it as well. Now this mavoi, the entire back wall of the mavoi is gone. The entire back side of the mavoi leads into this chutzner. Therefore, it's fully open to this chutzner. You can't carry from the mavoi into the chutzner because there is no eruv chatzeros or shetufei mavois between the mavoi and the chutzner. Therefore, you can't carry the mavoi either. However, the chutzner you could carry. Why don't you have a problem that the chutzner is open to the mavoi? Because the chutzner's wall is not fully open to the mavoi. The chutzner is wider than the mavoi. So only the part of the chutzner which is sharing a wall with the mavoi, or it's sharing what would have been a wall if it hadn't been open, that's open to the mavoi itself. But if you come through the mavoi and you stand just at the entrance to the chutzner, look on your left and your right, there's a wall there. The chutzner is extending further left and right than the mavoi itself. Therefore, the chutzner is not fully open to the mavoi. How wide is the opening? It's less than 10 amas. Therefore, it counts, as far as the chutzner is concerned, it counts as just a doorway. You have just a doorway, that's fine. You don't say that the chutzner is fully open to the mavoi. So you have an interesting thing. The mavoi is fully open to the chutzner. The chutzner is not fully open to the mavoi. So you can't carry from the mavoi to the chutzner, and you also can't carry within the mavoi itself because it's fully open to the chutzner that you can't carry into. Any zone which is fully open to another zone that you can't carry into, you're not allowed to carry within the original zone. Now, the chutzner itself is not fully open to the mavoi. It has a doorway leading into the mavoi, and therefore, that is why you are allowed to carry in the chutzner. That is the pshat in Rav's halacha. Therefore, Rav was not saying anything about this mavoi being open to Rishus Harabim on both ends. What Rav Yosef said in the name of Rav Yehuda was that this mavoi is not considered to be, that this mavoi, because it breaks through a yard and it comes out the other end and the wall directly across is open, it's not considered open at both ends. We thought Rav was saying that it is considered open at both ends. That's not what he's saying. He's saying there's a problem here that you don't have a proper Eruv Chatzeros, and therefore you can't carry in the mavoi because it's open to a chutzner that you can't carry into because of lack of.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.